Welcome to week 17 of the head coach episode for free Tendies. I'm here with Yanni. He has a Christmas tree in the background. How's it going, man? Are you enjoying your time home?
Yeah, man, I thought I'd make the video a little festive.
I decided to make it festive by getting a head cold. So if my voice trails off here near the end, sorry about it. But if you're watching this video, you're probably in championship week, and if you are just playing for your consolation bracket, I guess. But yeah, we this is our last one of the year. Then it will just be gambling show and mystery stuff. Then we'll call it a year. But without further ado, let's get into the game breakdowns. And you want to take this one first?
Sure, why not? First, we have the Chiefs starting off the week with an implied team total of 23 and a half, playing at the Steelers with an implied team total of 21. For the Chiefs lately, Worthy's been seeing an absolutely insane target share, and I think that's the biggest point to make about their team. It's been pretty straightforward all year. I know Kelsey has not been good this year, and I know he's had a really rough few weeks, but you absolutely cannot bench him if you somehow made the championship with drafting him. Mahomes, I think, has been on fire lately, contrary to the narrative about how he's been as a fantasy asset the last year and a half. So I'm absolutely firing up all three of them with confidence, especially Worthy. Um, for DFS, I'm going to look to Captain Worthy in a DFS slot. To me, he's sort of ascended into that locked in must start, whether you want to call him a flex or a wide receiver too, depending on how successful your roster is. I would encourage people to force Worthy into your roster with the type of usage he's been seeing, with the type of target share he's been seeing, and the consistency. He's been really consistent. And in that same vein, I'm going to sit Hopkins, Juju, and Pacheco this week. Pacheco clearly is not 100% healthy after his shin injury. He just does not look right. I love the player coming into the year. I was happily taking him between pick 18 and 22. So it kills me to say that, but this is a really good defense, and he's not right. Kareem Hunt got the touchdown over him last week, so I have no interest there. And then Juju and Hopkins are just not seeing the usage. Even Hopkins, man, I know he was really consistent for a while, but um, I just don't it should be a fairly low scoring game, should be pretty defensive heavy. It's going to be outdoors in the Steelers game, and then Hopkins is playing a low snap percentage. I don't want him in championship weekend on my team. For the Steelers, Pickens was estimated as a full participant today coming off that hamstring injury. I know there had been some discussion about whether or not he would be sat for the rest of the regular season, but it does seem like he's going to go if he's going to get two fulls in. If he goes from full to questionable or full to limited, I think at the minimum he's going to go in with the questionable tag, but it seems like they're going to roll him. If they estimated him as a full participant today, it seems like he's going, and you are going to start him if he goes. The Muth is certainly a startable streaming tight end. I think they're going to have to pass a lot, and I don't recall the Chiefs' exact ranking, but they have let some points up to tight ends this year. You're going to sit the running backs. I have no interest in starting Jalen Warren or Najee Harris. If you're in the championship, I actually think you can go ahead and drop either one of them if you need to, if you want to pick up a different handcuff on the off chance something happens later this week. I would wait to drop them until Thursday or Friday so your opponent can't start them. Well, not Thursday or Friday, you're going midweek. Yeah, I would go ahead and cut them. I would not have them on my rosters anymore, especially if you made the championship. Your sort of tricky decision is going to be Russ. He's certainly I mean, he's been prolific enough that I think you could start him in an emergency if you have a hurt quarterback and he's all that's on your waiver. But I probably would look elsewhere. Chiefs defense is really good, man. Yeah, I don't think anything else too noteworthy to say.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit worried about the Chiefs back end, right? Like the Texans didn't have that much success against them on, I guess it was Saturday of last week, but it's something that I'm keeping my eyes on. Like even like the Chiefs defense, which I've been writing all year, like I'm wondering if I start it here against the Steelers and Russ. So I guess is the I don't know, the channel is certified like Russell Wilson and Pittsburgh Steelers hater. I really don't hate the spot for him here, especially if Pickens goes, right? You get some of those cheap long balls. I know Calvin Austin came down with a couple of them um,
Yeah.
this weekend, but I don't know. I think especially in Superflex, he might be worth the start here. All right, next we got the Ravens going into Houston to play the Texans. The Ravens have an implied team total of 26 points. The Texans have an implied team total of 20 and a half points. For the Ravens, we're going to start Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, and Zay Flowers, and we're going to tricky decision Rashad Bateman. Then for the Texans, pretty simple. We're just starting Collins and starting Mixon. Then we're going to sit Stroud. Any interest in Dr. Schultz whatsoever this week or no?
No, he's
As a
not a
tight end.
fantasy relevant
Okay.
asset. I hope you guys aren't looking at him.
Okay. Well, we'll start with the Ravens first. Lamar and Henry, it feels self-explanatory at this point, right? This Texans defense is fierce. They do get after the quarterback. They do beat the crap out of quarterbacks. That being said, though, Lamar's the best at escaping, right? He's the most elusive quarterback there is. I'm not worried about it. Same with Derrick Henry. This Texans defense, they can stop the run. I believe they're top 7 in the league against the rush. That doesn't mean though that they'll just sell out to stop Henry. If you do that, then you got to deal with Flowers, Andrews, Bateman. It's not. It doesn't feel like a game where the Texans can sell out to stop the run, and Derrick Henry should be fine here in this spot. He got you to championship week. Roll him out. Mark Andrews. Many people were willing to write him off within the first 4 weeks of the season. If you were patient, if you held on to Mark Andrews, I don't think you got full return based on where you drafted him, but I think he's been good enough as a tight end one for you. We still like him in this spot against the Texans. I just think that Andrews, he's more likely to get a touchdown, right? And I would be more hesitant to start him if I thought it was like a Lamar Jackson 20 drop back or less game. I don't think it's going to be that. I think the Texans are going to score here. I think that this will be a competitive game. Mark Andrews shows up in these big games, roll him out. Then Zay Flowers, same idea. He finally got over 100 yards last week. He's had an up and down season for sure. It's kind of felt like he either gets you 4 or 5 half PPR or he gets you like 15 to 20. There's no real in between there. He's still the primary pass catcher for the Ravens. The Texans have been giving up more yards passing than they have rushing. Even Mahomes had a good week against them last week. Roll him out here. In my mind, he's like a high to mid end wide receiver too. He's not a one to me, but I would probably say anywhere between 15 to 20 is probably where I'd have him. Then Bateman, same idea. He's actually very similar to Flowers in the sense that he's very explosive and the volume isn't there, but well, Flowers' volume is more there, right? But Bateman can do less with more volume. He's a more explosive player. It's just like he's not going to get that many targets. So if you feel like taking a shot on maybe 5 or 6 Rashad Bateman targets in championship week as like a high variance flex, you can do that. I think that there's a good chance he does get into the end zone. I think this is probably like an over total game to me. Then for the Texans, this is probably one of the more disappointing slides we've had on the year. Nico Collins, we're still going to start him. Now that Tank Dell has officially gone out too, it's back to pretty much where they were last year. Like they're pretty much back to where they were last year. The Texans are with their passing options. Collins has proven to be the guy, even with all three of Steph Diggs, Tank, and him on the field. He's going to be needed even more so. This is a pass funnel defense in the Baltimore Ravens. They're really good at stopping the run, not so good at stopping the pass. I think the Texans could find themselves down very easily here. That's the time to roll out Nico, wide receiver one for me this week. And then Joe Mixon's also going to be a start. This is less so about me thinking he will have a great rushing performance or efficient rushing performance. This is more so that he is the unquestioned bell cow of the Texans. He's the most likely to fall into the end zone from the 1 yard line, and he's going to be getting passing down work. That's very important. The CJ likes dumping it off to Mixon. Mixon's pretty good on those types of routes. This Ravens team is a beast to go up against from a rush defense perspective, but still rolling him out here with confidence. Then we're going to sit CJ Stroud. There was a little bit of back and forth between me and Yanni. I actually kind of like the spot for him this week. Fact of the matter is, though, he hasn't been over 20 fantasy points since week 9 of this year. I wouldn't do it in your championship week, right? If it's the consolation bracket, whatever. But if you're playing for the big money this week, like I would try and take a bigger swing. Like a higher variance player like Anthony Richardson maybe might interest me a little bit more if you're favored to lose than like your 15 to 18 points from CJ. What do you think, Yanni? Did I miss anything?
Not a whole lot to add. I do want to say though, I'm proud of us for like since week six or seven, we've called Andrews a start, and I think we've been proven pretty right on that, dude. I think he's had a really nice second half of the year, and I would guess he's going to be correlated with some championship runs, dude. I would guess there are people who picked him up off the waiver or got him cheap in trades that are
The only thing
doing.
I'm like weirded out about with the Ravens is I just thought Likely was going to be more involved, like on a
Yeah, I mean, he
weekly
caught a touchdown.
basis.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Should be a really interesting game here, just in terms of projecting for both teams going into the future. Seahawks with an implied team total of 23.5, Bears with an implied team total of 20. For the Seahawks, we're treating it as if Kenneth Walker III is going to miss another game this week. When you're getting an MRI on your ankle after coming off of like he's coming off of a 2 to 3 week injury. He's missed 4 to 5 weeks this year. I would assume that means he's well and likely out. Sharps was just named the team starter. I know he's popping up as questionable on their injury reports with a squad injury. He played through it last week. We expect him to play through it this week. And I think Sharps has shown, especially against a soft run defense that is also a run funnel defense. Dude, you got to start Sharps. You have to start him. I cannot imagine a roster in which it makes sense for you to bench him. I know he's a little bit banged up, but every time this year when he has gotten 100% of the workload, he's delivered. JSN continued being absolutely on fire with a 20-point half PPR performance this week. I know this is a much better Bears secondary, but JSN plays in the slot. He's going to avoid the Johnson matchup that DK is likely going to draw. I love JSN this week. Again, two guys that I would hope you are and never looking at pulling out of your lineup. You're going to sit Geno Smith. This is a really good secondary. Geno's a little shaky as it is. I know he had a pretty good game last week on like 43 attempts. Um, I don't want any part of that in the championship, especially like please don't start Geno. DK is going to be your sort of tricky decision. DK finally had a good week last week. He caught that nice bomb. I think he had 9 points on the first drive on a 25-yard touchdown, 9.5 PPR on a 25-yard touchdown. Dude, the Bears are really good at limiting explosive pass plays for the most part. They're really good at handling teams' X receivers. Johnson's a legitimate shutdown corner. And DK's been really inconsistent. I believe the last 5 weeks he's had one game in double digits, and it was last week. He's coming off the MCL injury. Now, maybe you feel like he's finally getting healthy and he's ready to roll. I'll tell you guys in the 2 leagues where I made a championship with DK on my roster, I will be starting Juwan Jennings over DK Metcalf in one league, and I will be starting Calvin Ridley and possibly Marvin Harrison Jr. over him. I have a choice between those three guys in another league, but I'm leaning towards just outright benching DK for this matchup. And I suppose I have a choice between DK and Brian Robinson Jr., but I would probably roll Brian Robinson Jr. So I'm pretty low on DK this week. For the Bears, though, you are going to start. You are never sitting DJ Moore. Again, we've been telling you guys all year. I know he hasn't always delivered, but he's kind of evolving into like this awesome PPR scam. And against the secondary that is gettable, and the fact that they chose to force feed him, I'm absolutely rolling DJ Moore this week. I'm absolutely rolling Swift this week. The Seahawks have gotten chewed up on the ground more than once. I really like the matchup for Swift. He's getting enough receiving work, even with Roshan coming back last week. He had pretty good usage. Starting Swift. And then Keenan Allen, after their most recent shift in head coach or interim coach or whatever, Keenan Allen's been getting force fed. He's actually been like kind of on fire for, I don't know, 4 of the last 5 weeks. Your mileage may vary. It's going to depend what your roster looks like. But for me, he's like a green light start this week. Absolutely. Caleb Williams is a sort of tricky decision along with Odunze. Odunze, it's just not consistent enough. I do think we're going to get a really nice discount on him going into next season. So to me, that's more of a next season play and a next season discussion. Think about what JSN was this offseason. I think there's going to be a lot of parallels there between the two of them. But for this year, man, I don't know how I could tell anyone to start him. He's much closer to a sit for me, but he's also not a sit, right? Because I do think he's been productive enough and he's getting enough of the air yards. He has enough potential there. I'm just looking elsewhere. And then same with Caleb. Caleb's actually been really efficient this year. Only 5 interceptions all season. And he's been getting lit up like a Christmas tree back there, right? With the sacks and all that. I actually don't think. I think the narrative about Caleb is way off as far as what the products on the field has been and how he's been discussed nationally. But that doesn't matter for fantasy, right? I'm absolutely not starting him anywhere. He is only a sort of tricky decision in the sense that certainly in 2 QB leagues, right? Like I think you can rip him this week, but in 1 QB redraft, 12 team, absolutely not.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what the Seahawks defense is, right? And like as a Caleb Williams manager, unfortunately, for a great portion of the year, a lot of like your Bears pieces in the offense and Caleb himself, it's just kind of it boiled down to what Caleb are you getting this week. It's a very dangerous game to play. If you think that the Seahawks defense and Mike McDonald are legit, I might even sit Caleb if you can. But yeah, I think that you have it right on the wide receivers for whatever reason, since Thomas Brown has become the interim head coach, he's decided to make DJ Moore a PPR scam and get Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze the downfield targets when DJ Moore was one of the most explosive receivers in the league the previous year. Why that is the case, I'm not sure. But at this point, I think DJ Moore is just like kind of like a high floor flex type of deal, right? And Swift, we like him in the sense that he's going to be getting all the work, right? And he has the passing down work as well. Nothing really to add on the Seahawks. I will say though that my only roster that I have left playing for a championship is a JSN one, and he has been a key contributor. That is for sure. All right, next you got the Chargers going into New England to play the Patriots. The Chargers have an implied team total of 24 points. The Patriots have an implied team total of 19.5 points. For the Chargers, we're starting Justin Herbert, J.K. Dobbins if he goes, and Lad McConkey, and we're going to tricky decision Quentin Johnston. Then for the Patriots, we're going to start Ramondre, and we're going to start Hunter Henry, and we'll sit Drake May. So let's start with the Patriots here first. They had a pretty good performance last week against the Buffalo Bills. It wasn't a great offensive showing by any means, but like just in terms of a team performance, it was pretty good. And this Chargers team is just coming off getting blown out, I guess, 2 weeks ago by the Buccaneers. So they lost their mojo a little bit in terms of being the top scoring defense. I don't really know what's going on there. I think that at the end of the day, they just kind of are well coached but don't have as many guys. We're still going to sit Drake May though. There's just not the guys really around him to have success. It's championship week. You could start him and say, oh well, he's got rushing upside, but like you're counting on Kayshawn Boutte or Austin Hooper or Hunter Henry or Pop Douglas to get in the end zone. I just don't like the ceiling here. So we'll sit him. We're still going to start Ramondre and Hunter Henry, though. They're effectively like the most locked in for targets and work on the team. Hunter Henry working the short to intermediate stuff. He's been getting like 7, 8 targets a week, that type of deal. He hasn't like exploded off the page or anything, but he's a startable tight end. I think if you're a zero tight end roster and just looking for points in your lineup. And then Ramondre too had a pretty good week against the Bills. The Bills are run onable. This Chargers team has been a little bit tougher against the run, but I really do think that's how the Patriots try and attack this and keep it close. And if the Chargers struggle to score, right, you want to play ball control with Ramondre. Like him as like a flex start here. For the Chargers, it's looked a little weird. It's kind of been up and down from Herbert, right? We've had a couple spots in prime time against the Bengals being one of those ones. The Broncos game last week was another one where Justin Herbert has looked really, really good. And we've had other spots where this Chargers offense as a whole just looks really bad, right? So it's kind of trying to figure out what are we going to do with this, right? I think that part of the reason we like Justin Herbert this week is because J.K. Dobbins did have his practice window open up. He is potentially going to be back, and I think that this Greg Roman offense, this Chargers team, they want to run the ball. That's their identity when they're not as talented out wide. Like Justin Herbert can carry you sometimes, but I think J.K. Dobbins, if he comes back, is going to be a net positive for the entire team. So we're starting Justin Herbert. We're okay with paying a little bit of the volume away for hopefully more efficiency. We're starting J.K. Dobbins if he goes. This is a very gettable defense in the New England Patriots, and we're starting Lad McConkey, the new wide receiver one target monster on the Chargers. My only issue with Lad is I wish he got thrown to more, and I wish he got more touchdowns. But still love the player. He's a rock solid wide receiver too for me this week. And then Quentin Johnston, if you want to take your shot, he's effectively working as the second wide receiver on the Chargers. He's had a couple games where he's looked good. He's had a couple games where he drops multiple balls and looks like absolute dumpster fire trash. It's just whatever you're thinking. I think he's more of a DFS for me than a championship play, but use your best judgment.
Okay, again, dude, I like me and Ted were talking about it before this week. One of the sneaky, like most important games of the season this year is going to be the Broncos at the Bengals. Broncos with an implied team total of 23.25, Bengals with an implied team total of 26.25. The way it shakes out here, guys, is if the Broncos lose out and the Bengals win out, the Bengals are going to get the playoff spot over the Broncos. It gets sort of even more interesting where if the Chiefs beat the Steelers this week, they have the number 1 seed locked up, and the Chiefs play the Broncos next week. So what do the Chiefs do? Do they start start their starters? Do they sit them? Whole lot of permutations and combinations of playoffs that are going to be derived from this game. This game is the starting point of that. If the Broncos beat the Bengals, the Broncos have secured themselves a playoff spot. Um, in that vein, I love Knicks this week as a start. Ted is a lot more bearish on Knicks than I am, but I as far as a fantasy asset, dude, I would rip him this week, no problem, full steam ahead. As far as just what the matchup offers, right? Constant negative game scripts, the need to keep throwing. One of the highest over unders of the week, at least so far, at 49.5 is what Vegas has this game pegged at. And just as soft as baby shit defense that has let multiple quarterbacks go off on him, multiple skill position players go off on him. This is really a team you want to target when you're playing your guys against them. I absolutely would start Sutton this week. I think Sutton profiles is like a mid-range to high-end wide receiver too, with wide receiver one upside, and he's been that for most of this year anyway. Really one of the most underrated players in the NFL, and I think he will be again this week. Check that DFS price tag. If he's under $6,000, man, you got to get him in your roster. You got to get him in your roster. Same thing for DFS for your sort of tricky decision. Vele had that nice touchdown last week, and really he's been a pretty sweet player for the most part of this year. Like he has a lot of like elite attributes, I would say, where he just sort of keeps flashing. Whenever I'm watching Broncos games, I'm like, God, that kid's good. God, that kid's good. Am I starting him in a redraft championship league? Absolutely not. But am I starting him in DFS this week? Absolutely. I absolutely am. And then sort of a weird note. Apparently it was announced, I believe today, that Estime is going to get more looks as the Broncos starter, like he's going to absorb more of that share in the backfield. If I knew one of the Broncos running backs was going to be getting 60 to 70% of the work, I would absolutely start them with confidence here. The problem is I have no confidence in which running back that's going to be on a week-to-week basis. You want running backs in the Sean Payton offense. You want running backs playing the Bengals. I just can't tell you who's going to get the work. So especially in redraft, but even in DFS, I'm just sort of staying away from it. If I had to start one, I would start Estime. I don't know how you guys made the championship if you're looking at Audric Estime as a potential RB2 this week. For the Bengals, we know the deal here. Burrow, Chase, Higgins, there's really no debate there. When Higgins is healthy, you put him in. Chase is one of the top 3 most premium fantasy assets in the whole game. Burrow was probably one of the sharpest picks you possibly could have made this year. If you waited and took the discount at like the 5-6 turn or even the 6-7 turn on Joe Burrow rather than reaching for someone like CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson, you got well rewarded. I think I'm going against Burrow once, maybe twice out of my 3 championship games, and once, maybe twice out of my 3 games for third place. Like I'm a Burrow, I noticed was really correlated with successful fantasy teams this year. You are absolutely never sitting him, even against a good defense, even against one of the best scoring defenses in football. I love him this week. I love him every week. Chase Brown has just been tremendous, a monster since he got the start. Again, this is not someone you're ever looking at sitting. I don't really need to say that much about him. And against the Broncos, like it's probably a team you'd rather be running the ball against than passing the ball against. So I love him this week. Chase Brown, thank you, sir, for getting me and Ted into a championship game this weekend. That is it's been an awesome season. Start all 4 of them, start them with confidence, start them happily. Good job drafting them. And then you're going to sit Gesicki and Yosivas. You're not starting. I don't really mind their third receiver on the Bengals, but we sort of know what he is in redraft. Whether it was Tyler Boyd, whether it's Yoshi Voss this year, like you just sort of keep him on your bench, and if a guy gets hurt, they're maybe flexible. If not, you don't really want to start him, right? And then Gesicki, if it was one tight end, if the Bengals' whole tight end room were condensed into one guy, we could tell you maybe to do something with that. Gesicki's had his games this year where he's gone off, but it's not. It's a mess. We don't know who's going to go. Don't be streaming the Bengals tight end in championship week.
Yeah, the Yoshivas call out was more just to like, to tell people not to chase because
Yeah,
he got in the end zone last week. Sometimes
yeah,
people will see that and chase. Just
good
just don't
player.
chase it here. Yeah, he's a fine player
Good
for
player.
sure. I don't really have anything. I guess yeah, I got nothing. All right. Next we got the Arizona Cardinals going into LA to play the Rams in Jimmy. Um, the Cardinals have an implied team total of 20 points. The Rams have an implied team total of 25.5 points. For the Cardinals, we're starting Kyler Murray. I know it's been tough, but just keep doing it. Trey McBride and either James Conner or Michael Carter, depending on whether or not James Conner plays. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. has made the tricky decision list, not a full-blown start. Then for the Rams, we're going to start Kyron Williams and Puka Nakua, and then we're going to tricky decision Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp. And let's start with the Jimmy and the Rams first. It's been a couple back-to-back, like just not great offensive weeks for the Rams. I mean, you could say that part of that is the games they were playing, one of which was in the rain against the 49ers. Another one was like a 30-degree game in New York against the Jets. Whether or not you buy into that Matt Stafford gets cold and isn't as good narrative, I don't know. What I know though is that his numbers and Cooper Kupp's numbers have not been great the first 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. I would be shocked if you made the fantasy playoffs with either of those two guys. But if you did, I would say tricky decision this week if you like the Rams in a dome. Like the theory for Stafford, right? Because he doesn't present the rushing upside, is he needs to throw for like 300 and multiple touchdowns for you to get any value out of your fantasy quarterback. So do you think he does that against the Cardinals, who just got run all over by Chuba Hubbard? Feels more like a Kyron game to me. That's kind of why we have him as a tricky decision. Same with Cooper Kupp. It's fair to just call him the wide receiver too on the Rams now. I came into this year, I was kind of a truther. I was like, well, I don't really know if Puka Nacua is going to be the wide receiver one. I think Cooper Kupp has just as good of a chance, and there's a 2 round ADP difference. I will target Cooper Kupp. Turns out that was wrong. Puka's the locked and loaded one guy to own on the Rams. The volume just hasn't been there in the last 2 weeks for Cooper Kupp or the production. You can start him if you want to, if you think it's a good spot, if you think it's a big Stafford game. I would hope you could find someone else. I understand if you can't though, just based on where you had to draft him. I think Kyron Williams, dude has been averaging, I believe, like 27 opportunities a game, which leads the NFL for. He's actually second. Saquon's number one in opportunities per game, and Kyron Williams is number two. He's just as solid as it gets in terms of what his role is. Whether or not you love the player, if you have a team that just got run on by 150 and 2 touchdowns against Chuba Hubbard, you have a running back that is going to get 27 carries. Sign
Yeah.
me up for it. He's probably fallen in the end zone at least once, maybe twice. And then Puka, he's just a stud, man. He's just a stud. I think that I will be drafting him very high next year in redraft. I would treat him as a wide receiver one this week if you made it through the kind of stinker he gave you last week of 7 points. Full confidence in him there. For the on the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, I feel like his fantasy production has been better than him as a player this year. He just has one or two of these terrible throws per game, like one of these head scratching awful interceptions per game. The Cardinals, I think that they were in great position to make the playoffs. Now they've kind of bungled it. They've been eliminated. We're still going to start Kyler here though, because fantasy is not real life, and he presents rushing upside on a pretty solid team with a high point total against another team that struggled on defensive points this year. Still a quarterback one to me. It's just kind of it's just not like top end. Like Kyler Murray's not my quarterback three on the week, right? He's closer to like QB 7 or 8, but that's still fine. Trey McBride, I believe he's at how many is it now, Yanni? 87 without a touchdown.
I don't remember, but he had a bad week last week. He only added 3 to the total last week. I think he had 3
Yeah.
receptions for 29 yards last week. So yeah, he's somewhere around there.
Trey McBride is the ultimate statistical outlier. I believe he's going to be between anywhere from the high 80s to low 90s in terms of receptions this year
Yeah.
without a touchdown. That being said, he's still gotten you there at points this year based on his production. I saw Kyler was saying we're going to get 85 into the end zone. I would still roll him out here as a top elite tight end option. This Rams team, they've given up career games to guys like Jawan Jennings, to guys like Saquon Barkley, Jackson Smith, the Jigba. They make stars. They make stars, that Rams defense. I wouldn't be surprised to see Trey McBride pop off here in championship week. Pay you managers back for the entire season of no touchdowns with like 5 championship week. Wouldn't that be nice? And then James Conner or Michael Carter. This really just depends on who goes, right? We're okay starting either of them because either one, in theory, should get all the work. I believe it was a hyperextended knee for James Conner. He left in the third quarter against the Panthers. He did not return. I would guess he doesn't go, but we're having to shoot this on Monday because the NFL wants to do Christmas games, so we're having games on Wednesday. It fucks up our schedule, but I would assume James Conner doesn't go. Just keep your eyes on like the news or whatever, or injury reports. If James Conner goes, fire him up. If he doesn't, Michael Carter, go get him. You should be fine. James Conner, in my mind, is like a high end RB2 to low end RB1 this week if he goes, and Michael Carter's more of a flex play. What do you think, Yanni? Did I miss anything?
No, man, I think that's about right. And yeah, just look for the practice reports. If it's a PCL injury for James Conner, I would be pretty surprised if he went. If it's a bone bruise, I would say he's more likely to go. That's all you're keeping an eye on. Okay, Cowboys at the Eagles. Cowboys with an implied team total of 17. Eagles with an implied team total of 26.5. This game is outdoors in the Eagles Stadium. The Eagles are pissed off missing the game. For the Cowboys, though, there's really not a whole lot to say. You're starting CeeDee Lamb just because CeeDee's been way too good to bench. But honestly, I would temper expectations. I expect like a mid-range wide receiver 2 game out of him. It's just such a tough matchup. The Eagles secondary has been so good. Vic Fangio is so good at taking away what another team does the best. He's proven it game in and game out this year. They're allowing the fewest fantasy points. I don't know if that changed this week. That may have changed a little bit this week. Coming into their game with the Skins this week, they were allowing the fewest fantasy points across the board to each position in the NFL. So yeah, I would just say like for DFS, stay away from CD. For your redraft league, you're absolutely not benching him in the championship week. It's just I would say he's a lower end start for what we'd normally expect out of CD. Ferguson is like not broken. I think his high with Cooper Rush is 7.9 points. He's been splitting reps and usage with Schoonmacher. I'm bummed because I'm actually a big Ferguson fan. I drafted him kind of heavy this year with Dak Prescott, and it's just not happening with Cooper Rush. So you're going to sit him. You're going to sit Cooper Rush. God, don't start Cooper Rush. And then your sort of tricky decision is going to be Rico Dowdle. I know he's been really, really productive this year, but I'll be honest with you, he's way closer to a sit for me than a start. So that's what a sort of tricky decision is, right? There are going to be rosters that you guys have where or in full PPR, maybe you're hoping for those 4 or 5 dump offs, which certainly there's going to be the game script and the opportunity for that to happen. I have no interest. I think that this Eagles defense, like going into next year, if all things hold the way they are right now for the most part, like it needs to start being flagged as something you want to actively avoid in fantasy matchups, even with an asset that's been as good as Dowdle. Dowdle had a kind of flat game yesterday against Tampa Bay, right? Uh, yeah. I would really look elsewhere on your rosters. I would work really hard to see what other options you can come up with this week. And then for the Eagles, just a little note about Jalen Hurts. History dictates he has between a 60 to 70% chance to sit from a concussion at this point. All right, in the year, but I'm seeing 30 to 40% chance to sit. So it's really hard to say, right? Because he's got his neurological baseline testing that he needs to get done. We're not sure what's going to go on with that. Okay. If Hertz plays, you're absolutely starting him. He sort of gave like a silly look to the referee when they tried to flag him. So like maybe he's feeling fine, dude. And certainly the NFL is apt to rush players back from concussions. It's not very common that you see players miss too much time from a concussion, but it very often is 1 week. So we really don't know. We're all waiting, right? It's up in the air. But if he goes, you're going to start him. Saquon and AJ Brown, whether Hurts goes or not, you're starting AJ Brown and Saquon. Kenny Pickett had immediate chemistry with AJ. You had a really nice week out of AJ this week. And if he didn't get, PI'd like 16 times last week, you probably would have had a bigger week. So I can tell you start both of them with confidence. Kenny Pickett, absolutely not. And then sort of tricky decision, Devonta Smith. I believe he had like 8 something or 7.9, something around there, high sevens, low eights, and half PPR last week. I actually like this matchup for Devonta if Hurts is in. I like it more, but he's still just a tricky decision for me. He's not a must start. Um, I think it's a pretty heavy Saquon game. Saquon beat the shit out of the Cowboys last time they played. The Cowboys defense does not like defending the rush as it is. I know they've been more stout lately, but like Bucky was finding tons of room last night. It just profiles like a Saquon game to me. And if you made the championship with Devonta, I'm actively looking to switch him out. I did make the championship with one Devonta roster, and I'm going to start Juwan Jennings over him. I'm probably going to start Brian Robinson Jr. over him. Those are the choices I have there. So that's sort of where I'm at with him.
Yeah, really just for this Philly side, right? I think it's important to note how much better the Cowboys have been playing. Like their defense really has made a statement. I'm thinking they might have saved Mike McCarthy's job. I thought for sure he was out, but over the past 5 weeks with how that defense is playing, I think there's a good chance the Cowboys keep him. So really needing Jalen Hurts here to be going. If Kenny Pickett is the quarterback against this version of the Cowboys team, I'm not sure the Eagles can even win the game. You still would get there with Saquon and AJ Brown, I figure, but the ceiling in my mind without Jalen in there is so much lower. And then for the Cowboys side, Rico Dowdle, great player. absolutely fantastic player. It's just a call out on the defense more than anything else, right? Hopefully you should have a roster where Rico Dowdle is like your RB 3 or 4, and you have a reasonable pivot there. All right, next we got potentially my third team. I don't know if third team is a thing, but I really like this Indianapolis Colts roster going into New York to play Yanni's second team, the New York Giants. The Colts have an implied team total of 24 points, and the Giants have an implied team total of 16 and a half points. For the Colts, we're starting Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. If you were a JT roster that made it through the fumble fiasco, congratulations for your trip to the finals. I don't think it would be possible to lose if you were a Jonathan Taylor roster last week. Then we're going to sit Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. Then for the Giants, we're going to start Malik Neighbors. We're going to STD Tyrone Tracy, and we're going to sit secret top 15 running back Devin Singletary. And we'll start with the Giants first. I believe Drew Lock popped up on the injury report. It is only Monday. It is only Monday, so we still have things to unravel. But I was seeing reports it might be Tommy Cutlets again. At this point, it does not matter for the New York Giants. What matters to the New York Giants and the stance we're going to take here is that they have a 16 and a half implied team total. That is not very many points you're chasing. I think no matter who plays quarterback for the Giants, they will be a bad quarterback. And now Devin Singletary is working into the backfield slightly with Tyron Tracy. What does that mean for fantasy managers? It means you can only start so many people, right? And the only reason in my mind Malik Neighbors is a start is because of the number one, he's talented, and number two, he is just getting volume regardless of what happens. He's a 10 to 12 target machine. He's the manufactured target machine, so his floor is high, right? Like Malik Neighbors isn't going to bust on you because they're trying to force feed him the ball. That's why he's a start. I think he's more of like a flex option in championship week. I would not mind if you switch to a player that has higher upside than the 16 implied team to- point total of the New York Giants, but he's not gonna goose you, right? But when you have this low of a point total, you kind of have to decide what you're fading. I'm going to favorite Tyron Tracy a little bit here. He only got 11 opportunities last week against the Atlanta Falcons. He did get in the end zone, so the fantasy box score is there. It's just kind of what are we doing here, right? Do we want a running back with 60% of the work on a team that's not going to score very much? You could take your shot if you want to, if you like the talent. I just wouldn't do it. Then for the Colts, Anthony Richardson. This is like he's not a great pocket passer by any means, but it doesn't matter for fantasy. Rushing upside is king. Completed 7 passes last week, still scored 24 points. That's the beauty of the strong, fast, mobile quarterback. Start him here with confidence. Same with Jonathan Taylor. If you like really good players that are touching the ball anywhere from 24 to 30 times a game, he's your guy. We're gonna sit Josh Downs and Michael Pittman just because I don't think there's enough passing volume here. I think the Colts should be able to just run the ball relentlessly down the Giants' throats in a mollywhopping. What do you think, Yanni? Did I miss anything?
The Giants are god awful on the ground, just god awful, like at defending the run. I think if you manage to, like, I got lucky with a first round buy on my Jonathan Taylor roster. If you manage to slip through with Jonathan, I actually have a roster with Gibbs and Taylor as my running backs, right? If you manage to slip through with Jonathan Taylor and you're in the championship this week, I think you're going to get fully rewarded for what you drafted him for. We've only gotten a few games this year where you really saw what you were targeting, which was insane volume, right? And a dedicated rushing attack. And we finally saw it last week in the biggest of ways. I know for Ted in our league, it happened in the consolation bracket. And I know for a lot of people, it probably did. But I'm absolutely forcing Anthony Richardson into lineups too this week. I'm going to build DFS lineups around it. Start with confidence for sure.
Yeah. One more note on Jonathan Taylor. I forgot to mention. He has 3 breakaway runs over the past 2 weeks. Those like
Get, get,
giant like that's how you win fantasy weeks right there, right? You had the
yep.
40-yarder that should have been a touchdown, 2 more last week. Would not be shocked to see another couple here against the poor Giants.
And for those of you shopping him next year, you may be able to get him at like pick 25 if people are spooked enough. So something to keep in mind. Okay. Panthers with an implied team total of 21, going to the Buccaneers with an implied team total of 28.5. I was surprised. That spread seems a little chunky to me. Little bit, man. The Panthers played them really close last time. They were moving the ball at will. I was surprised to see a 7.5 point spread on here. I wonder if it's going to move by Sunday. I would assume some money is going to come in on Carolina come Sunday. But for the Panthers, I'm actually fine streaming Bryce Young this week. I think he's given you a little bit of rushing upside recently. I think he's been playing just really good football all around. And I think the Buccaneers defense loves to make stars out of whoever they're playing against. I mean, Cooper Rush looked like, Peyton Manning last night. So yeah, look, I think you could start Bryce Young this week. Again, that's probably more of a DFS thing. I'm probably not starting him in redraft. Thielen though and Hubbard, you should absolutely get in your rosters. Again, skill position players have really dominated against the Buccaneers, and simultaneously the Buccaneers score enough points to force those skill position players to have to keep scoring. I absolutely love. I mean, Hubbard, you're not thinking about sitting this week. I know Thielen's probably been floating in and out of your starting roster. I'm absolutely ripping Thielen, like full confidence. Dude, that's such a cool. I've always been an Adam Thielen fan, just always have. And then the one year that he fell off a little bit on the Vikings, I took him over Cooper Kupp in the 4th round. And that killed me because that was the year that Cooper Kupp had his big breakout, right? It was the difference between me winning or losing that league that year. But overall, I've always loved the kind of player Thielen is, just a super dedicated, hardworking, fundamentally sound player. And that's really showing through. Bryce Young loves him. That is his wide receiver one. Leggett was out last week. I don't know what he's doing this week. Just get Thielen in your lineups. Do him confidently. And then Coker, again, more of a DFS streamer, but I like Coker as a player. He's made some chunk plays the last few weeks. He had the big touchdown 2 weeks ago. Certainly not a redraft player, but someone you can rip in DFS. For the Buccaneers, Baker, Evans, Bucky. I mean, what can I really say? I know Evans had the bad week last week. Actually, Evans' bad week last week is likely going to eliminate me from a championship game. But all in all, you're never thinking about sitting any of these players. Bucky has been one of probably the we were all wondering who the Kyron Williams or the Puka Nacua pickup was of this free agent year. Probably Bucky is going to be that guy for a lot of rosters. I don't know. I'll be curious to see at the end of the year how correlated he is with championship wins, but I assume it's going to be up there. You're going to sit Cade Otton. Cade Otton, Baker no longer wants to play with Cade Otton. He has elected for McMillan. And McMillan's looked excellent, dude. McMillan's had between 16 and 19 points for the last 3 weeks. The Panthers defense is a little bit stingy against wide receiver. Coming into the week, they're giving up the 18th most points in half PPR to wide receivers. But he's been so good. He's been so good. He's eating into Evans' production last week. He's been on that level. And Baker seems really comfortable throwing him to him inside the 10-yard line. So I don't hate him at all as a streamer, as a flex this week. I don't know if I want to bank on. He has the downside to have a 4-point week in the championship. So I have a little bit of trouble plugging someone like that in at this point in the year. And then Rachaad White, he didn't have a terrible game. If he didn't fumble last week, he would have had 9 or 10 half PPR points. Our narrative all year has sort of been, if you think they're playing in a negative game script, Rachaad White is more than startable. And if they're playing in a positive game script, you probably don't want to get him in there. Or if you get him in there, you're expecting more of a mid-range flex level of play. I would say this week, that's what you're expecting. Is sort of a low floor flex. I'm maybe 8, 9 half PPR points with the upside to go 10 or 11 and always the chance to fall in for a garbage touchdown. He also looked like he got knocked out at the end of the game last week to me. So I don't know how healthy he's going to be. Keep an eye on practice reports. I would probably avoid White this week too.
All I really have to say about that is Bucky wouldn't have fumbled that ball. Bucky would have taken that to the house.
Yeah. Bucky's amazing.
Yeah. I guess only other note on here is just I really like the spot for Chuba Hubbard. The last time these two teams played, it was the Panthers and Bryce Young driving the ball in overtime down to the 30-yard line. Chuba, I think he was over 100 yards on the day. He fumbled the ball, gave the ball back to the Bucs, and that resulted in the game losing, in them losing the game. So I think it's going to be Chuba Hubbard pissed off spot here. Yeah, Panthers plus 7.5 looks really, really good to me.
Yeah, it's not going to hold. I don't think that's going to hold by Sunday.
Oh, I got the best game of the week. Last week I got the Jaguars and Raiders, and this week I get the Titans and Jaguars. Titans have an implied team total of 19.5 points. Jaguars have an implied team total of 21 points. For the Titans, we're going to start Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, and Chig Okonkwo. Hard to say. And then we're going to sit Tajay Spears. Then for the Jaguars, we are going to start Brian Thomas Jr. and sit everyone else, everyone you could possibly think of. We're not doing it. And we'll just start there, right? There is no one on this Jaguars organization that is worth a single fuck other than Brian Thomas Jr., who is a total stud, by the way, potentially the best wide receiver out of the draft last year. But it's just everything sucks on that offense. You can't tell anything other than Brian Thomas Jr. Nothing else is consistent. Is it going to be Tank Bigsby or ETN that gets the carry? We don't know. It's a muddied up situation, right? Is Brenton Strange looking nice this week? Oh, he had 10 targets the week before. Oh, he fumbled and now he gets benched for the rest of the game. Runs 3 more
Yeah,
routes.
fuck him, by the way. Fuck
Oh,
him.
maybe we like a little Parker Washington this week. Oh, he's never gone over 2 half PPR points ever since he had a good week. There's just nothing else to say here, boys. You either have Brian Thomas Jr. or the Jaguars are dead to you in championship week. The
Yep.
Titans are a little bit more interesting, just based on the fact that this Jaguars defense is so bad. This Titans team has consistently underperformed too. It's such a bummer to see the AFC South. I thought the AFC South was going to be a sick division this year. Turns out it was not. Tony Pollard just for the volume, right? If you want a running back that's probably going to get 20 to 22 opportunities, probably be the guy to fall into the end zone here, you can play him. Calvin Ridley, this is the revenge game, part two. The first time he played, I believe he went over 20 half PPR fantasy points against the Jaguars. He had Will Levis at that point, who was playing slightly better football. It is now Mason Rudolph. I think that the upside is capped a little bit, but I think you could still start him here as like a flex to low end wide receiver too. And Chigakwonkwo was the one that really jumps off the page. He had 11 targets last week. That was over double what anyone else had. I think that there's a very good chance that Mason Rudolph will just take the dump off to Chigakwonkwo, and this Jaguars team is the worst secondary in the league. If you think the Titans will move the ball, if you think they will have any form of success offensively and Mason Rudolph might throw a touchdown or two, there's a good chance it would go to Chigakwonkwo. I think you could start him as a tight end, a really gross championship tight end one this week that might get you 12 or 13 points and be the difference between winning your league or not. Then Tajay Spears is a sit. It's just I think he's a really good backup, but that's what he is. He's just a backup to me, a handcuff. He did get in the end zone again twice last week. It was really weird situationally what was happening though. The Colts went up by like 24 points, I believe, and that's when Tajay Spears came in. The Titans made a run. They made it an 8-point game, which was kind of hilarious. I thought the Colts were going to blow that. So Tajay Spears got you there on the box score. That does not mean though that he will get you there in this box score. I think it will be competitive, and Tajay Spears may be looking at 5 to 8 touches. If you want to chase that, that's your prerogative. I wouldn't do it though. Anything I missed here in this toilet bowl?
Perfect. Perfect. I've been seeing, just real quick, I've been seeing chatter that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to push for a first round pick next year. Um, that would be crazy. I would not take him that high, but I'm curious, how high would you take him next season as of now? If I just asked you roughly, I know you can't put too much thought into it. Like I would think, I would think at the 2-3 turn. If he's there like where Debo and Ayuk were this year, I think I would rip it. But I wouldn't rip it if it's 15. If you're talking like pick 15, I don't think I can do that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I
What
saw
would
an
you do?
underdog. Underdog was having him go mid second round. But that's best ball though, right? For redraft, I'd feel fine with him as my wide receiver one on my roster for what that's worth.
Okay.
He's not in the elite class though, like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson,
Well, he doesn't have the
Nico.
quarterback. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
that's why I can't like get there all the way with him. But like he's an excellent player. If he had that type of quarterback or that type of
Yeah.
surrounding supporting cast, I think he would be in that class. It's just
I was just curious. Something I was thinking about when I saw that first round pick, dude. That's too steep. Too steep. Okay. Oh my God. Just an absolute mess of a game. The Raiders, 18.5 implied team total, going to the Saints with a 21-point implied team total. I don't know who the Saints quarterback's even going to be at that point. It might be Derek Carr. He might be back by then. They didn't put him on IR, so I guess he has a shot. And apparently, Chris Olave has an outside chance at playing. I don't think it's this week. I think they said last week of the year, but Chris Olave is making a pushback to play. I don't think he gets back this week. And Derek Carr, I'd be surprised, but I guess it should be noted that both of them have an outside chance. And technically, so does Alvin Kamara, although most groin injuries are 2 to 3 weeks. And they said it was a mild or a more severe groin injury than they thought. Still a lot of injury stuff to keep in mind with the Saints. This could look different come Sunday, but again, we have to record this before the games kick off on Wednesday. For the Raiders, it's looked pretty similar all year. You're going to have Myers and you're going to have Bowers starting. I think a sneaky underrated aspect of the Raiders is for 2 years straight, their running back position has actually been really productive. And actually, 3 of the last 4 years, Jacobs was a league winner in round 7 and 8, right? So I think one of the most sneaky aspects about the Raiders, more to keep in mind for next year, is like Abdullah had 17 half PPR points last week. I know Madison got the touchdown. I don't remember what his line was, but Madison also got a touchdown. Like the Raiders running backs are actually pretty productive. Okay. And this is a good matchup for them. But am I going to tell you guys in championship weekend to rip one of them? I'm not. I have Abdul on a couple rosters that made the championship just in case something happens with Madison. If one or the other goes down, I would actually tell you guys to flex either one of these guys. But the way we're going to put it is Abdullah and AOC are going to be sits. I don't imagine them trailing enough that Abdullah's target share is going to matter. He did get, I believe he had 6 receptions, like 59 yards last week, and he either had a receiving or a rushing touchdown. I don't recall which. It's way too inconsistent to chase at this point. And then Madison's going to be your sort of tricky decision. Again, closer to a sit for me just because of the inconsistency. They might decide to run all Abdullah at some point. And then again, if you start Abdullah, that might be all Madison. I just don't have interest in trying to sort out what Antonio Pierce is thinking about football. I actually have no interest in what Antonio Pierce is thinking about anything. I do not care whatsoever what goes on in his fucking meathead. I hate him. I can't wait for him to be out of the league next year. He's ruined a season for the Raiders. And then for the Saints, if Kamara is out, whether or not Derek Carr is in, it does not affect it. Whether or not Olave is in doesn't really affect it. I'm going to call Miller as an outright start. Kendry Miller was actually a pretty talented running back in college. I really liked him coming out of the draft. I know he's dealt with injuries off and on. He had 3 rushes out of 10 for over 10 yards when Kamara went out last week. If he gets a 34-point week in my one game, he will push me into the championship in one league where I had 165 points scored against me, unfortunately. But I would say that he is a start against the Raiders. The Raiders give up a lot of points to skill position players, and I'm happily, and they're a little bit better of a pass defense than a rush defense. I'm happily plugging and playing Kendry Miller this week. If he's still on your waivers, and you still have Fab, go ahead and dump it on him. He's worth it. And then your sort of tricky decision is going to be MVS. And again, this is assuming that Derek Carr and Chris Olave don't play. If Derek Carr and Chris Olave play, I would prefer to start Olave over MVS, and MVS would become a sit for me. And it's a boost to Kendry Miller if they were to play. He was already a start, but it is a little bit of a boost. But as things sit now, Kendry Miller, dude, he's a low floor flex. Probably, again, it's more of like if he's very cheap in DFS, if he's in that like $4,800 range, I'll give him a look, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's this whole Saints thing, right? It's a little unfair for us to try and prognosticate this because we have not seen. Like the game kicks off, the Saints and Packers, it kicks off in an hour and 15 minutes here, right? And it's like I think we would have a better idea of what Kendra Miller is, of what MVS is going to be, how Spencer Rattler will look. We can just kind of tell you what the Kendra Miller is slotted to start. Alvin Kamara is not coming back, right? Do with that information what you will. There is a very good chance that, yeah, you got Kendra Miller going tonight in clutch time. We'll see how that goes. And then for the Raiders, I don't know. I think you're fine if you want to chase if you're trying to if you're in like a 2 flex league, for example, right? You're playing 2 flex players. I don't mind chasing Madison for the touchdown equity. It's more like, does he fall into the end zone from the 1 yard line? The Raiders just have been terrible with their rush efficiency all year. Doesn't mean they can't score fantasy points, but they will not be going for very many yards every time they touch the ball.
Yep.
All right, next we got the Miami Dolphins going to Cleveland to play the Browns. The Dolphins have an applied team total of 23.5 points. The Browns have an applied team total of 17 points. For the Dolphins, we're going to start Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, and Johnny Smith. We're going to sit Jalen Waddle, even if he goes, and then Tua is going to be a tricky decision. And for the Browns, we have Jerome Ford as a start, David Njoku as a start, Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman are sits, and then Jerry Jeudy will be a tricky decision on the condition that Jameis Winston starts. And we'll start with the Dolphins first, I guess. This is a little bit more of an interesting conversation, I think. A-Chain, Hill, Smith, at this point, it's hard to take them out of your lineup. Hill more so because, he was drafted so high. A-Chain and Smith because of the actual production. We are getting the Dolphins in very cold weather week, though. It's going to be under 30 degrees in Cleveland. We have said multiple times this Dolphins team does not travel. They cannot score offensively, move like they want to in the cold. So we'll still start A-Chain, Hill, and Smith just because you almost have to, right? But Tua's a tricky decision. Waddle's an outright sit. Basically, we just don't like the Dolphins offense as much here. A-Chain finally had the efficient rushing week last week against our very own San Francisco 49ers. I would not expect it to be the same against the Browns. I would expect your A-Chain value to come from the little paper cut bubble screens that he's getting. Same with Johnny Smith. He's like a combination of bubble screen along with slant. Like this whole Dolphins offense has just been really weird and frustrating to watch this year. I don't know if like Tyreek has really fallen off a hill and that's why they just cannot push the ball down the field or what the deal is, but there's been a noticeable shift in the way this offense operates. But that just means it runs through A-Chain and Johnny Smith, and you're just happy if you have those guys on your fantasy team. For the Browns, we're going to start Jerome Ford in Nick Chubb's absence. He's been pretty good. I believe he had like a 60-yard touchdown or something last week. He's on my bench. I didn't start him anywhere, but I saw that and was like, oh, that's neat. It's just if you like a featured running back, right? David Njoku, I believe he scored 8.5 PPR fantasy points with Dorian Thompson Robinson as his quarterback, which is like, if you can score 8 fantasy points with Dorian Thompson Robinson as your quarterback, you are amazing. You're an amazing tight end, and I love you. Um, I think probably low end tight end one for me. If it's DTR, if it's Jameis, he's a smash spot. You have to get him in your lineup. Absolute league winner. With Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman, we're going to sit them just because they're the more outside pieces of the Browns' passing attack. If it's DTR, there's absolutely no reason why you should be chasing that. If it's Jameis, you could chase it, but Tillman's coming off like a month-long concussion, so who knows how he will look out there. Elijah Moore just gets those lower value targets. It's like you could get 7 targets from Elijah Moore with Jameis, but like, what is that worth? Like maybe 50 yards, right? Like, do better for your championship week. Jerry Jeudy is the wild card with Jameis. He should be matched up against Jalen Ramsey, which is not ideal. But if it's Jameis and you want to chase those points, you could do it with Jerry Jeudy, I guess. I would lean towards a sit, but say you're projected to lose your matchup, like you're a big underdog, you could roll Jerry Jeudy, see what happens. I guess he does offer a high floor, I think, or a high ceiling with Jameis if he does end up playing. What do you think, Yanni? Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, just a quick note about Ford. He had a 60-yard rush and then a touchdown. It wasn't all at once. I was pretty surprised. I saw people that did not want to start Ford. I was like answering start sit questions on Reddit this week. And I kept getting pushback when I told people to start Ford. And it was like pushback over guys like Patrick Taylor on the 49ers. Or people were asking like, should I start Ford or Pollard? And I said start Ford, or Ford and Kendry Miller. Even I said start Ford. I know he had some down games without Nick Chubb there, but like personally, I'm ripping Ford with confidence, dude. He has receiving upside. He has explosive play upside. Last year he was top 5 in the NFL and plays over 30 yards, and he only like started whatever portion of the season. I don't know. I think Ford's a really underrated player. I was surprised to see so many questions about that. I would be making sure to get him in your lineups this week for sure. Okay, Packers and Vikings. Packers with an implied team total of 23.5. Vikings with an implied team total of 25. Potentially a really important game for if the Lions fall off here, which one could potentially, nip at their heels or whatever. This game might determine who goes on the road or who stays at home and who plays who. Very important game. The last game was a great football game. Came right down to it. Love had I believe he had 29 points last time they played, or maybe 33, something like that. But he also had a few turnovers. But in any case, you're starting Love and Jacobs against the Vikings. Jacobs, I mean, I don't need to say anything about that. One of the sharpest picks you could have made at the 2-3 turn this year. If you drafted early in the year, you might have got him at the fourth round, early fifth round. And then for the Packers, the Vikings are a really good matchup for wide receiver. The problem with the Packers is you have such spread out and diffused production. Wicks mixes in a little bit. You have Watson with the big bombs. You had Jaden Reed in the first half of the year, falling off in the second half of the year. You have Romeo Dobbs having mental and emotional breakdowns and then coming back and having several 2-touchdown games since. I'm not really interested in being in the business of deciding week to week which Packers wide receiver is going to take advantage of this good matchup. And it kind of kills me, right? Same thing I said about the Broncos earlier is there's a winner to be had here. One of those guys is probably going to have a good week. Maybe two of them are. But if you're in the championship, are you going to plug someone in who very potentially is going to get 4 to 6 points, right? And are you comfortable doing that? And do you really not have any better options? Again, I think if you guys made the championship at this point, you do have better options. If you're decimated from injuries and you're just grabbing someone off the wire, I do prefer Watson. And then if Dobbs is on the wire, I would emergency flex him. But that is like, dude, I'm talking about if you guys have 3 to 4 injuries and you have nobody you can start at flex, sure, you can look at them. Reed, at least you feel like you have a chance at chasing those points in the first half of the year. But all in all, they're all tricky decisions, and they're really all closer to sits for me. Tucker Kraft has been kind of up and down this year, and it's a tough defensive matchup. But again, if you need a streamer this week, that's what a sort of tricky decision is. I don't mind it if you need to do it. But any roster, I know Ted has like a roster with Mark Andrews and Tucker Kraft. I mean, come on, start Mark Andrews. Yeah, be judicious, and especially like this guy. If you have Hawkinson and you have Tucker Kraft, start Hawkinson. And that is for the Vikings. You're going to start Darnold. You're going to start AJ. You're going to start JJ. You're going to start Addison. You're going to start Hawkinson. Addison's been on fucking fire for 5 to 6 weeks now. I have a really hard time getting out of my lineups. I think he's a tremendous flex. He's the best kind of flex in the world because you might get a 25 spot out of him. Jefferson had an absolute monster week for you guys in the semis. If you were starting Justin Jefferson in the semifinals or in the any of the 2 of the last 3 weeks, I think 3 of the last 3. I don't know what he did in week 15. I don't remember, but week 14 and week 16, he has absolutely gone off. Good chance you're in the finals in large part because of Jefferson. And then Sam Darnold, I know he's not looked at as a premium fantasy asset, but make no mistake about it. He was the 10th overall scoring fantasy asset coming into this week, and he followed that up with another good week. He's probably going to be the 8th or 9th overall fantasy asset this year. He has, in fact, been a premium fantasy asset. And even with the good defense, this is an indoor game. This is a high scoring game. I am looking to get my Sam Darnold in my roster where I can.
Yeah, I agree on Sam. It's more so like if you
Fantasy,
had like, yeah,
not
for
football.
just for fantasy, right? Like if you had like a crazy bad matchup, then like maybe I fade Sam Darnold. Like maybe I fade Sam Darnold against like, I don't know, Philly or the Steelers or something, right? Like this Packers team, they do play some good defense. They do create turnovers, but they have not stopped teams like other organizations have stopped teams before, and Sam Darnold, I think at this point, with the weapons around him, it's too big to fail. Just use your best judgment, right? If it's like Baker or Darnold, I might roll Baker instead, right? Like same game in this one. Who do you prefer between Jordan Love and Sam Darnold?
I would take Sam Darnold because he has the softer matchup.
Yeah, I would agree, actually.
And Jacobs is more likely to rush. Jacobs is more likely to take
Mhm.
touchdown equity off the board.
So it's just use your best judgment, but Sam should be a fine start here. I really have nothing to add on the wide receivers to the Packers other than I kind of like Jaden Reed the most this week out of the 3. I know that's a very weird take. It's just the blitz beater thing, right? The getting the ball out quickly is how you beat zone blitz. I wouldn't be shocked to see some stuff schemed up for Jaden Reed to try and take advantage of that. But I get that it's been brutal having him on your team, and he's been like in the 40s for wide receiver since week 6. So I understand if you don't want to take that shot.
Well, that's actually a really good point, by the way. If you're trying to slow down blitzers on the outside, those wide receiver reverses will do that for you.
Mm-hmm.
They punish that specifically. So I actually think that's a really sharp call out by it.
We saw the Seahawks do it a little bit actually. I kind of liked some of the things they did against the
Not
Vikings.
bad. I like the take. I like the take. We'll see.
Next, we got the Atlanta Falcons going into Washington to play the Redskins. The Falcons have an implied team total of 21.5 points. The Redskins, not the Commanders, the Redskins, probably playoff bound Redskins, have an implied team total of 26 points. For the Falcons, we're starting Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and we're just going to sit everyone else, including Michael Penix. Then for the Redskins, we're going to start Jaden Daniels and Scary Terry, and then we're going to tricky decision Zach Ertz and Brian Robinson Jr. But that's it. So let's start with the Falcons here first. I think that Michael Penix looked pretty good. Like last week, he didn't have a prolific passing day or anything, right? But he looked pretty good to me against the New York Giants. Granted, it was the New York Giants. This Redskins team is going to be more of a test here. I don't know. I wouldn't start him like that. That's reckless. It's starting Michael Penix against the Redskins championship week is absolutely reckless. I just wouldn't do it, right? And because we haven't seen enough Penix against a competent football team, are you really going to trust any of the other passing options on that team, right? Are you going to trust your Darnell Mooney's? Are you going to trust your Kyle Pittses? I would say double, don't trust Kyle Pitts, but it just feels like since we don't know, we can only recommend Drake London because he's the most consistent and best passing option. But how good he's going to do, I think it's very, very. There's a ton of variance here. I think Drake London could be awesome. He could just be a wide receiver three. Hard to say. The only guy I really, really love this week for the Falcons is Bijan Robinson. This Falcons team has kind of ridden him. They've really ramped up his workload a lot more. I know last year, like Arthur Smith was public enemy number one for not getting him enough work. I think that managers are satisfied with the workload this year. Bijan has been a reason this Falcons team wins games. He's been a reason your fantasy teams are making it this far. Start him with confidence here against, I believe they were the 26th rushing defense last week. I'm sure Saquon knocked him down a couple more spots in the Redskins. For the Redskins, we're going to start Jaden and Terry. This Falcons defense is leaky. They've had two back-to-back good performances, but those were against the Oakland Raiders with Desmond Ritter and the New York Giants with Drew Lock. Jaden Daniels is far different than those guys. So he can run, he can throw, he presents the rushing upside, had 5 touchdowns last week against the top scoring defense in the league. Granted, the circumstances were a little weird, but Jaden got you to the championship. You're not sitting him now. Same with Terry, man. Every week, I feel like I come on this show and say that I am concerned about a low volume Terry week. And every week, he just gets you. His floor is like 14 and his ceiling is in the mid 20s. The dude's been awesome all year. I believe he's like the fantasy wide receiver 5 or 4 at this point. Fire him up here against a Falcons defense that has been leaky. AJ Terrell's a good player, but it's hard to keep up with Terry's speed. Then we get a tricky decision, Ertz and Robinson. Ertz more so, he's like the short over the middle stuff. He's probably good for 4 catches, 4 to 5 catches, maybe like 50-ish yards, 45-ish yards, and you got a good chance of falling in the end zone. So low end tight end one. I don't think he presents that much ceiling play or ceiling upside. I would try not to start him if you're in the actual championship game. Then Brian Robinson, in theory, it's a good spot for him. In theory, he should be the workhorse of the backfield. He got doghoused. I believe he had 2 fumbles last week and basically just rode the pine for 2 straight quarters. I would. It just depends on how pissed you think that the Redskins will be at him, right? If you think they'll give Brian Robinson full run, I think it's a fine spot here in what should be a positive game script. The Redskins should be running the ball, kind of just make the clock move faster. If you think that like Jeremy McNichols has earned more time in the backfield than maybe don't here, I'd feel fine with him as a flex this week. Don't love it, don't hate it. What do you think, Yanni? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I mean, I have a tough choice to make on Robinson. I can start two of Jawan Jennings, Devonta Smith, DK Metcalf, and Brian Robinson Jr. So it's just a really hard call. I'm probably going to start him, assuming that they're not done with the player because of a bad game. I think they just benched him because they thought he got the yips a little bit. He got in his head. He had uncharacteristic fumbles. I think the organization thinks really highly of him. But I feel a lot worse this week than I do last week because that was wild, man. And it also completely fucked me in 2 games. I had him going in two semifinal games, and he got 1.2 points. So and took 2 touchdowns off the board for the Skins, right? So it's really hard. I wish that did not happen the week before championship week, but it did. It
I
did. And
I remember I remember having the same conversation a couple years ago with our friend Antonio Gibson.
uh,
The organization just said screw you to him.
uh,
The good news
dude,
is Ron Rivera is not there anymore, so
yeah,
they got more of a
he's
chance of sticking with Brian
there.
Robinson.
He's there in spirit. I bet you it still smells like his old man breath in the coaching office. No, yeah, dude.
Well, his old man breath wouldn't be in the coaching office because he was wearing a mask. Okay.
Yeah, right, right. Oh God. Okay. We'll briefly go over this game. The Lions with an implied team total of 27.5, going to the Raiders with an implied team total, or Niners with an implied team total of 24, closer to the Raiders this year than the Niners, unfortunately. With an implied team total of 24. We kind of know what the deal is here. The Lions are still playing for the number 1 overall seed. The Eagles have had 2 drop passes that are probably going to determine whether or not they get home field throughout the playoffs and a first round bye. The Lions are banged up. They want that bye badly, and they hate the 49ers for what they did to them last year. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm expecting an absolute massacre here. I'm not looking forward to this game. If the Lions or if the Dolphins are coming into your house and beating up on you, can you imagine what's going to happen here? We don't even know. I mean, are the Niners going to shut down Nick Bosa? Are they going to shut down Fred Warner? Are they going to shut down? Who knows? Are they going to rush to bring back Isaac Orendo? I would expect Trent Williams to sit out this game. Things could get out of hand here pretty quickly, and for that reason, you're going to start all your Lions. The guy I like least is Jamison Williams because I don't think the Niners are going to push a pace where they're going to have to air it out to him. He had a really nice week for you last week, though, but I'm totally fine flexing him. He's the guy I like the least, right? Because he's sort of the least essential of all these options. Amon-Ra St. Brown is actually going to draw the Diamador Lenore matchup. And he's, again, in my opinion, I've been saying it all year, he's one of the most underrated slot corners in the league. He's one of the most underrated football players in the league. Dude, his run support, just all around a fantastic player. And I do think he's going to give Amon-Ra some problems, which maybe opens up more opportunity for Jamison Williams. But in any case, you're starting all of them. I was, on my Jared Goff roster, which made the championship this year, which I can't believe. I was sitting there cycling through backup quarterbacks, trying to find someone to back up Goff with. I'm not doing that. I'm just going to go ahead and rip Goff. He went off last week outdoors. I have no issues here with any Lions. Unfortunately, I think they all had pretty big weeks. For the Niners, I know Brock Purdy had a bad game on the field last week, but he did have over 22 points in fantasy. And really, I think he continues to be one of the most underrated fantasy assets at the quarterback position. He's high floor with a little bit of ceiling. He presents a little bit of rushing upside. He presents pretty little downside. I know he's had a few 12, 13-point games this year, but they're few and far between. For the most part, he's a pretty productive fantasy asset if the weather's good. He had 2 bad games also in the rain and the snow, right? You don't want to target him in those games. But I do think the weather report looks clear for the Niners game. I'm starting Brock. I'm starting Jennings. I'm starting Kittle. I know Jennings has also had tapered off here the last 3 weeks after kind of exploding when his spot starts before that. But I'm still going to get him in my roster. Like I said, I'm probably starting him over guys like DK Metcalf and Devonta Smith this week. And I have a really tough decision between, I can only start one of 3 between Ladd McConkey, Juwan Jennings, and Malik Neighbors. I'm probably leaning Ladd on that one, but he's making it a tough decision. That is how highly I think of Juwan this week. He's had a few just missed big plays, really from the Buffalo game on. It's just been hard all around, man. But I do think he's a start this week. And then your sort of tricky decisions are going to be Debo and Garendo. I don't know if Garendo's going. If Patrick Taylor goes, do not start him. If Garendo goes, he has enough receiving upside and the game script's going to be right that I think his receptions are going to be the difference. He had a really nice, as a receiver out of the backfield, he was excellent in college, and he's been excellent for the Niners in the 2 starts he's had with them. Debo, if you're a creep, man, if you're a sicko, if you made the championship and you're like, I want to do something weird, go ahead and start Debo and try to root for him throughout the course of this game. He actually has, by the way, he didn't have a great championship game, but he has chewed up the Lions previously, like in that season opener 2 or 3 seasons ago when he was on that crazy tear of the 2019 season. 2019, 2020, God, maybe it was more.
It was 2021.
2021. Okay, so it was 3 seasons ago when he had that awesome, I think he had 160 yards and a touchdown or 2, something like that. And frankly, he's trying to put on a show, right, for whatever team may potentially trade for him this year. Like, I actually don't hate Debo this week. I could not, in good conscience, tell you guys to roll him in championship weekend. And then again, just circle back to Guerrero real quick. He's a perfectly reasonable flex, perfectly reasonable. You're just not going to get that 26-point upside he showed you the first week he got the role.
Yeah, I just want to continue to hammer home this point about how banged up the Lions defense is, specifically in the back end.
Yeah,
Brock Purdy has effectively played himself out of tens of millions of dollars per season over the past like month of games. This is about as good as it gets in your own home building for a bounce back spot. Brock needs a bounce back spot. The Niners in general just need something. I don't see any way that the Niners stop the Lions on defense. Like, I think the Lions are going to be able to do what they want to the 49ers with Jahmyr Gibbs, with
yeah,
JMO, Amon-Ra, you name it. I just think they have too many moving pieces with Ben Johnson pulling the strings. But I kind of like the Niners to score some points here too. I love the spot for George Kittle. I love the spot for Jamal Jennings. I even like the Debo spot. I feel like Yanni has challenged me because my roster that is in the finals has Debo Samuel. Right now,
totally.
my flexes are James Cook and Chuba Hubbard. Let me know in the comments if I should start Debo instead to show my
No,
true Niners fandom. I'm just kidding. I
no.
wouldn't do that. I would not do that. But that's going to do it for us. That's Monday night. If you made it through the whole video, thank you. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell. It really helps the channel out. That was our last head coach episode of the year. Fantasy season's done on Sunday, boys, or I guess Monday. It'll end with this Lions and 49ers game. Let us know in the comments if you won your leagues, how many teams you had win your leagues, if this content has helped you out at all in your fantasy leagues. Really love to hear from you guys. Like, sticking with us all year. It's been a grind. We've been cranking
Yeah,
out videos. We are video producing machines at this point, but it's been a really fun time for us to get these out to you. It's fun to kind of like pick through everything. Sometimes you don't think about it so much. Looking forward to next year with a couple of tweaks, improvements, that sort of stuff. And we'll still have our gambling episodes for you, and maybe a Mystery Monday or two left in us. I don't know. But any last words you got for the fans, Yanni, before we sign
no,
off?
sir. But I would love to know. I would love to know if anyone that's been watching consistently took home a championship this year. Please, please let us know. But no, thank you guys for your time. Thank you guys for the awesome season. We appreciate it.
Yep, yep. And catch you on Friday for the gambling show.